Hey guys, welcome back. In this video, I'll be talking about 11 maths and the tips and techniques that I use to get an A for it. So as per what I mentioned in my physics and chemistry video, I took the A-levels in Singapore, and over here you'll see the subjects that I've taken. You can pause the video and read it. I studied H2 maths in JC between 2017 to 2018, and I got back my results on 2019, which was an A grade, the highest possible for A-levels in Singapore. Over here, you will see the timeline of the things that I will be talking about. First, I'll talk about H2 Math as a subject, my results, my study tips, as well as my overall feelings about math. There will be timestamps in the description below, so if you want to skip to any part, just feel free to skip to it. So first up, let me talk about mathematics as a subject at the A-levels. Firstly, you will realize that a lot of people will take it because mathematics is quite a common prerequisite for many of the university courses. So a lot of students will be keen in taking mathematics because it will help to open up a lot more university paths for you in university. So out of all the subjects that I took at the A-levels, I personally found mathematics to be the most conceptual to me, as well as I personally find it not content heavy at all, since it's mostly just about numbers and symbols, so things like summation or infinity. Like for me personally, I don't really like to see words at all, and I personally found these numbers and symbols to be easier to understand and comprehend. It's also my favorite subject at the A-levels, I think mainly cause of three reasons. First up, the words are minimal. So as the kind of guy that doesn't really like looking at words, the looking at all these symbols and numbers really suited me. Second up, I kind of like getting into a very logical state of mind. So I personally enjoy seeing how things flow in a very logical order. And I think that is what mathematics is about at the A-levels. So that's another reason why it suited me. And third thing I like is that there's no ambiguity. Because when you answer the questions, you either get it right or wrong. And I personally really like this clear-cut answering method. Now, from some people that I've talked to, some of them find that mathematics is really hard, or that they think that they are just not talented or so-called not gifted in doing mathematics. And this is something that probably I will try my best. I will give my personal intake at the end of this video about why some students may feel this way. So I'll probably just talk more about it at the end of the video. So over here you can see how I performed throughout my 2 years in junior college. So overall I maintained my A throughout the 2 years and also eventually got an A grade for the A-levels. I'm just putting my results out here so that I can perhaps add more credibility to the things that I'll be sharing later on. So over here you will see the summary of the things that I'll be talking about, of the tips that I want to share. So you can pause the video right now to read it, all the way from point 1 to point 14. Now I don't think I'll be talking much about the general tips here, cause I've already addressed them in my physics and chemistry video. And I'll probably also include them in a general A-level tips guide that I'll be putting out. So I won't be talking about these 4 points here. So let's just jump straight into point number 5. So my first tip for you about math is that you need to understand what you're doing conceptually. Now I personally never met anyone that memorizes math or memorize math and do well, since you really need to comprehend what you're doing. So you need to understand what is A, what is B, and things like why does C lead to D. Most of the times when you do the math question, it really requires you to be versatile and adaptable. Since usually from past exams, they like to tweak things here and there to change out the question. So it really requires you to think on the spot for the answers. So definitely you should learn the concepts behind them. However, you should definitely try to remember your tools, your necessary mathematical tools. So things like your differentiation and your integration stuff. So example, things like this that you see here, these differentiation formulas. because most likely you will not have time to derive them on the spot in the exam through first principle or whatever, since these things are really time consuming. Now, I'm speaking about this in the context of the GCE A-levels in Singapore. So I'm not really sure if the other versions of A-levels require you to derive all this on the spot. So if you're taking the GCE A-levels in Singapore, you probably want to remember all these formulas right here when you solve your differentiation questions. But at the same time, you should also have a basic understanding of how all these equations came about from things like the differentiation by the first principle. So yeah, you should still know your basic concepts, right? So this is just a personality of mine, which may or may not be suitable for you, but I like to think more in terms of numbers and symbols, since I'm personally not a fan of reading words. So for example, the arithmetic progression, sequence of numbers in which each term other than the first is obtained from its preceding term by adding a constant, positive or negative, called a common difference. So you can just write this as the nth term is a plus n minus 1 multiplied by d, where d is a constant. Then n is the pattern number, and a is the first term. So like something like that. Then for example, horizontal asymptote, when x approaches infinity, y will approach a constant. So it's just something like horizontal asymptote as x approach positive infinity or x approach negative infinity, y will approach k, where k is a real number. So just something like that. Now, if you want, you can even represent this using a graph. You just need to find out which model suits you the best for you to understand the content. So the next two tips that I have for you is to use diagrams for visualization, as well as to scope the exam question. Basically, you should write down whatever relevant stuff you can think about, whether it be equations or formulas. Because for me, sometimes when I get too engrossed into solving a question, I will sometimes forget some essential concepts that I need to solve a particular question. So that's why I make it a habit for me to write down whatever stuff that I can think about. So let me try to explain how I do this through the use of an example right here. So as you can see, a circular cylinder is inscribed in a right circular cone of base radius 2c and vertical height c. So obviously when I first read this paragraph, this first sentence, I will know that it will not leave me hanging there because obviously I don't know where this cylinder will be exactly inscribed at. So I'll read on to the next sentence. One of the circular ends of the cylinder lies on the base of the cone, and the other end is in contact with the inner surface of the cone. So after I read this part, I'll first illustrate with a diagram of how this whole problem will look like. So there'll be a cone right here. This is the cone. Sorry for my bad drawing. And then inside the cone, there'll be a cylinder with the sides touching, and it's inscribed to the base of the cone. So this is like roughly how the diagram will look like. So for now, let's further read on. If the cylinder has base radius x, find expressions for the volume V and the total surface area S of the cylinder in terms of C and X. So after reading on, you will know that you probably need some formulas to find volume as well as surface area. So let me just illustrate the part whereby we will try to find the volume. So after I read the whole question, I'll just write down some volume equations that I know about. So for example, for the cylinder, I know that the volume is equal to pi r squared times the height of the cylinder. Then as for the cone, which is a right angle cone, I know that the volume is equivalent to 1/3 pi r squared height. Height is the height of the cone. So since it's going to be talking about cylinder as well as the cone, I know that probably the question will ask me to relate to similar triangles to find some ratios of height as well as the radius. Because as you can see here, we will have two triangles here, which is this small one as well as this larger one. So overall, I'll just try to write down whatever that I know about the question so that in case I get too engrossed into a particular part, then I can just take a step back and look at all the information that I have. And of course, for the diagram, you should also label it with whatever that you already know. So things like the base radius of the cone, its height, as well as the base radius of the cylinder. So all these things you should also label them in your diagram, which you will draw. So overall, I will just try to write down whatever that I know about the question and use it as a guide to help me to solve it. My next tip for you is to make use of your formula sheets well. I'm not too sure about A levels that are conducted overseas, but for Singapore students, you have this formula sheet called the MF26, whereby it will give you a list of useful equations and formulas to help you solve your math problems. I personally use this to lighten my memory load so that I don't need to remember too many equations and formulas. You should probably save your memory for things like remembering the rules of differentiation and integration. So make sure that you use this formula sheet well and try to reduce your memory load whenever possible. You should also get used to your calculator as well as know the functions that your calculators have. It might seem like a very trivial thing, but honestly, all these little bits of time that you can save by knowing your calculator well will eventually add up a lot in the long run when you do an exam. It can also be useful in helping you check your answers. So let me demonstrate how. So let's just use a very basic example here. Find dy dx for y equal x cubed plus 3 when x equal 2. So after you solve it by differentiating, so y equal x cubed plus 3, then dy dx will be equivalent to 3x squared plus 0, which is equal to 3x squared. So when x equal to dy dx will be equivalent to 3 times 2 squared, which is equivalent to 12. So I'm just using a very basic example for this.
So if you go to your graphing calculator here, there's this math function right here. So you click math. Then you want to find the derivative. So you click on it. Then you will see this derivative formula right here. So you just input it as x. Then you write down the equation that you want. So x to the power of 3. Then plus 3. You want to find the value at x equal 2. So you press enter, you can clearly see the answer right here. I don't know why there's a 0.00001 down there, but I guess it's just something that the calculator does. Alternatively, you can also find the answer through the use of graphs. So you press the step y equal down here. You can import the graph that you want. So over here you can see I've already imported the graph x cubed plus 3. Later you press graph. So over here you see the graph that's already plotted out. Then if you go to the calculate function here, so you press second and then trace, you'll see that it can calculate a few values for you. So right now what you want is the derivative, so you press on 6, and then you can find the derivative at any point you want. And you can see right here, it will also show me the answer for the derivative.
So as you can see, knowing your calculator well has its own benefits. Make sure that the calculator that you use for exam is valid for use, so you can check online for the official school websites to figure it out. I personally use both calculators, which is this Casio right here, FX96 SG Plus, as well as the T884 Plus C graphing calculator. So for this calculator, my main usage for it will be to do some quick arithmetics. Because I find that when I use this calculator here to do arithmetic, I tend to be faster. And then for this calculator here, it's mainly for me to find things like the derivatives, integration, as well as for graphs. So I will not use this calculator for arithmetic because I find that I'm slower using this calculator. So that's why I personally use both together. Now my next tip, and probably the most important tip that I want to share is to struggle through the obstacle when you face one. Now at some point in time when you do math, I'm quite sure you have met this mental block here where you are not sure how to proceed on with the question. So at this juncture here, there's two things that you will probably do. Is either you will give up or you struggle and try to think of an answer. And I find that for those people who choose to struggle through, is a step that is necessary for you to take in order to improve your math. Like regardless of whether or not you succeed in getting the answer or not, it's just this act of struggling through and building up your resilience that will really help you to improve your math. Maybe let me try to use a game to explain this. So for example, at stage 1, you probably need this amount of skill level to pass the game, and it gets harder and harder as it goes on, such that maybe at stage 5, you need this amount of skill level. Now the thing is, you may get stuck at stage 5 and you are not sure how to do it, so you go and refer to walkthroughs to see how other players actually pass the game. But the thing is that by looking at the solutions themselves, your tendency to improve and struggle through the game will just dwindle and dwindle down as time passes. So maybe at stage 6, 7, maybe even at stage 10, every time you feel that you get stuck and you don't know how to proceed on, your tendency to look at the walkthroughs will just simply increase. So your tendency to struggle and improve will just fall as time passes. This situation here is also very similar to math as well as solutions. The thing is, since math is such a black and white subject, you can easily find all the answers that you need online when people post the solutions. But by looking at all the answers online, your tendency and willingness to improve will just dwindle and dwindle down with time. Because since the answers are so readily available, your willingness to struggle will just simply fall. As such, your tendency to improve will also not be there anymore. But this situation will be different for exams. Because for exams, the solutions they need for the answer are simply not readily available anymore. So whenever you meet a question that you get stuck on, students maybe just tend to give up because they cannot solve the problem anymore. And that's why I think that it's really important for you to struggle through an obstacle that you face, because it will simply help you to build up your resilience and your willingness to improve in math. So this is really the most important tip that I have to share, which is to really struggle through a question when you meet one, and not just give up so easily. Now over here you can see the next 3 tips that I want to talk about. As for studying smart, personally I don't use Anki for this because I find that mathematics is not a very content heavy subject, and I practice math a lot on a daily basis, so I quite remember the things that I need to easily. But if you can use any method to help you better improve in mathematics, then by all means just go for it. I will not elaborate too much on these 3 tips here, because I'll probably include them in a general A-level video that I'll be posting when I get it ready. So just stay tuned for it. Now to sum it up, I would say that maths is really something that needs consistent practice for you to improve and remain good at solving problems. You can just treat it kind of like a muscle. If you don't exercise the muscle, you'll probably get weaker. So honestly, whenever you have any doubt, just seriously go and practice, practice and practice. It can help you to solve 3 things. First, solidify your content. Next up, you can also pick up the nuances that exam questions may ask that can cause you problems and learn for it. And lastly, practicing will also help you to rectify your conceptual errors. So really when you have nothing to do and or maybe you are in doubt of what to do, just go and practice. It will really help you a lot. I would also like to emphasize on struggling to overcome the mental blocks once again. It's really important for you to struggle and not give up so easily when you do math. If you are willing to put in the necessary effort and struggle through, I'm quite sure your mathematical understanding as well as your mathematical intuition will improve with time. So really, when you meet a question that you don't know, just don't give up and really try your best to struggle and try and solve it. So that's all I have to share. If you like this video, please do drop a thumbs up and I will do my best to keep more tips coming. All the best for your A's. Okay, bye bye.